And welcome to another Down the Rabbit Hole video. I wanted to pose a question. What do these three items have in common? We start off with the Canon BJC 600 printer. Then we have a regular old garden variety telephone wire. And the Sega Genesis. The answer? Built-in upgradability or expandability. And I think that's an amazing achievement in engineering. And it's getting to the final purpose, which is actually Genesis related. But let me just start off. The BJC 600 was a black and white printer which had a removable head inside, and with that you could actually swap it out with another model, and that would allow you to print in color. So you could turn your black and white printer into a color printer very easily. My apologies, I don't actually have the printer itself. I just grabbed a photo of it, but the point is the same. The printer was capable of being expanded from a black and white printer to a color just by swapping out a head inside. The telephone wire is kind of an interesting one. We all have telephone wire, standard stuff in all of our houses. You'd think, okay, well, what's so expandable about that? I might try and cut to a close-up inside here. There's actually 4 pins that you see. Those 4 pins correspond to these 4 wires inside, and again, I'll do a little close-up here. Now, what's interesting is these 4, this is called stranded wire, or stranded pair wire for old-fashioned telephone systems. And essentially what it is, your phone really only uses 2 of the wires. The other 2 have never actually been used. I mean, I suppose in certain setups, if you wanted to add a second phone line, then the other 2 wires would be used that are running throughout your entire house. But yeah, this is another example of expandability. All the telephone wires in the house have this ability to be expanded upon, and yet only 2 of the wires have been used. So you've been in a typical setup. Your house has only been using 2 of the 4 wires that are in this telephone cable. And that leads us to the Sega Genesis. I absolutely love the Sega Genesis, and I apologize I haven't been talking about it as much, because in order to do more Genesis stuff, I wanted to talk about what essentially this video is referring to. Built-in upgradability, and my particular fondness for the Sega 32X. This thing is incredible, and it's unfortunately an expansion module that a lot of people really don't like, but I wanted to kind of celebrate what a great device this thing is. Yes, the Sega Genesis and this 32X expansion module, I find this to be an amazing achievement of engineering. The fact that they could take a great console like the Sega Genesis, also known as the Mega Drive, with its huge library of amazing games, and actually expand it to make it run better and with 3D capability and an increased color palette by just slapping this module inside here. That's great. That's fantastic. And it's something that I really appreciate from just a design point of view. Now, this is by no means the first console to have ever done this. The Intellivision had the ability where you could plop it down inside a larger expansion unit with a keyboard, and it was essentially a computer at that stage. And there's even a modern equivalent of this 32X expansion in Project Morpheus for the Sony PlayStation 4. I've been hearing some people discussing how the other VR headset, the Oculus Rift, requires a great deal of graphical speed and power, and as impressive as the PlayStation 4 is, it's already going to be running some high graphic capability. To it also power a VR headset like Project Morpheus is going to be a questionable achievement. And a lot of people have said, but what if Project Morpheus itself has some kind of built-in circuitry to do part of the graphical drive itself? Maybe it'll take what's inside PlayStation 4, split it to the 2 views and speed it up and act like a little extra processor. And guess what? That's exactly what the 32X was. The Genesis would run fantastic games, and the 32X would actually similarly add a great deal of graphical power to it. It's amazing. I really, really love this design. I am a huge fan of the 32X. Now, unfortunately, the 32X gets a really bad rap in the gaming world, and I find that it's very sad. I really recommend you check out the Angry Video Game Nerd discussion about the 32X. He tears this thing a new one. He hates it, and a lot of gamers feel that way. And I'm not going to spend time, this is going to be a long enough video to begin with, but in a nutshell, the problem with the 32X was it was about 150, 160 bucks when it came out, and it did have a very small library of games, and when the Sega Saturn was only a year away, why would you invest in something like this? Plus, some people say this and a lot of other choices that Sega was making around that time. This is the first step in a spiraling down that Sega made that actually led to its demise. So some people view the 32X with a great deal of disdain because it was the beginning of the end for Sega. In a nutshell, this was released about a year or two before the Sega Saturn, and people wouldn't end up buying this because they thought, well, why would I? There's another module, or there's another console coming soon. Then the Saturn was released, and it had a very short lifespan before the Dreamcast came out. There are many videos online about the decisions Sega was making. I won't reiterate that here, but I can see why people dislike the 32X. Also, Angry Video Game Nerd describes this thing as looking like the Sega Genesis on life support. Like you plug that in, and you got the Sega CD add-on as well, and it just looks like this monstrosity. Personally, I think this looks gorgeous. I think the fact that this thing is expandable really adds a great deal of value to the Genesis. This 32X and the CD add-on as well, they give this thing more life, and that can never be a bad thing. The 32X requires its own power supply, and the video actually needs to daisy chain. I believe it comes out of the Genesis into the 32X, and then from the 32X to your television. And all of those wires make for quite a mess behind your Genesis setup. So if you've got limited shelf space, all of this does add a huge spaghetti junction behind your console, and not a lot of people like that. Also, the power supply for both of these machines end in a big square, they're called a wall wart, but basically it's like a large box with the prongs sticking out of it. And again, I'm going to link to the Angry Video Game Nerd's discussion about this as complaints. He shows how it's impossible to plug these things into one power bar. Now, I was lucky. A few years ago when I started getting interested in the 32X, a fellow on Atari Age actually mentioned to me that he had taken a Nintendo GameCube power supply and split it so that the GameCube power supply with its standard everyday plug, not the big square one, could go into your power bar, and then it would split out, one for the 32X and one for the Genesis. I'm going to show that right now, but that made that particular part of the equation a complete non-issue for me. And outside of that, I honestly think the 32X is a really, really great addition to the Sega Genesis. It doesn't have a huge library, and admittedly, I've only got about 5 or 6 games. I'm not going to show them all now because I really want to give each game its own moment, its turn. But I'm just going to show a few highlights here of what the 32X does compared to just the regular Genesis. So, first of all, let me show you what the power supply solution was, and then I'm going to hook this up and show you some 32X games. So as mentioned, here is that power supply solution the guy from Atari Age gave me. I don't know if you can make that out, but it says Nintendo GameCube on there. What he's done is split the power out. One end goes into the 32X. Other end goes into the Sega Genesis. Now the final step is to put these two together here. I'm sorry, but I think that thing is a thing of beauty. I honestly love that design because of the fact that you're expanding your capability. Maybe it's just me, I don't know. Maybe it's the engineer in me or something. And then the final step, if anybody's interested in getting a Sega Genesis with a 32X expansion, make sure you get this wire. This is absolutely critical, and apparently not a lot of units that you can buy on eBay are including this wire. So make sure you've got this. So what you want to do is take this cable, goes into the 32X up here. The other end of the cable goes into the Sega Genesis. There we go. 32X, ready to play. Let me show you some games here. Okay, so here is a typical Sega Genesis game. This is Desert Strike, one of the games I played way back in the day. Absolutely love this game. And I wanted to use this to begin with to show what regular old 16-bit graphics look like on the Sega Genesis. I mean, we all know, but I just wanted to give this as an example in comparison to what the 32X is about to do to this display. So here we go. We're on our aircraft carrier and we take off. We're flying over the landscape and we can shoot bad guys who shoot at us. Yeah, nice little game this. I always liked Desert Strike, but you can see how it's a very flat, two-dimensional, fun, but very flat kind of a game, right? This is what your typical Sega Genesis game looks like, and this one is awesome. And here is Star Wars for the 32X. Look at the use of the 3D. I mean, that is incredible looking. I just love what the 32X does here. Check this out. Now I'm going to try and do my best to talk over the sound here because I don't want to get copyright violation. But look at these, look at like the asteroids here. You got our TIE fighters to shoot at. Really, really great looking game. I'm going to try and fly in close. Look at that. This is 3D rendered 32-bit graphics. They look incredible. I'm going to do a proper review of this game in and of itself later, but I just wanted to give you an idea of just what this machine is capable of. It looks great. Here we have another game for the 32X, and this is actually also exists as a standard Genesis cartridge for the 16-bit version. This one is, and this is a great little game. I'm going to try and fire up just a standard race here. I'm just going to leave it in automatic transmission because I'm going to try and talk while I'm playing. Now these graphics may not look great by today's standards. But you got to remember, we're talking 16-bit console generation. And the fact that this thing even runs these kind of smoothly rendered 3D images, this is a very, very impressive bit of work. And honestly, the 32X version of Virtual Racing is the best one that exists up until pretty much the PlayStation 2 era. I'm going to do these games more of a in-depth review later on, but I just wanted to give you an idea of just what I mean by how smooth this thing runs. Again, we're running on the Genesis here. What you're looking at, the benefits all exist with the 32X. I also wanted to show you Afterburner. This also exists as a standard Genesis title, but the 32X one is very close to the arcade experience. I mean, just look at this. Let me give it a game here. Now I'm just gonna switch to an easier mode here, just so that I can talk while I'm telling you this stuff. There, we'll go with easy, but otherwise just leave it all as is. again, look at how incredible this looks. I mean, this is practically the arcade game, and I remember the arcade game back in the day. Look at how smooth the ground moves. Watch as I crash, because I'm going to do that a lot in this game. But you see how the ground just races up toward you? Those sprites are just flying along at maximum. This is an amazing achievement for an arcade port. Yeah, I really love the 32X version of Afterburner. And it's one of the best showcases as to what this machine, what this bit of technology does. It takes a very, very fast sprite scale game and turns it into something you can play on a 32 or on a Sega Genesis. Absolutely amazing. Now, there's one last thing I want to show you. I mean, again, I'm going to go into each of these games in more detail later, but there's something finally for the 32X that I wanted to talk about. So we're going to look at Street Fighter. And you're probably wondering, why Street Fighter? That doesn't use any 3D graphics. Why would this have anything to do with the 32X? The reason why is the 32X actually does some kind of a bypass to transmit nice, crisp, clean RGB graphics onto your TV screen, and it looks crisp and clean. I mean, when I first fired up regular Genesis games onto this same setup I've had for years, now through the 32X, the colors look sharper, the edges of all of the different graphics are nice and clean. It really makes a difference. So even for non-3D or non-32X games, having this add-on really improves the image. It's probably not going to come through on my camera here, but I swear, I am really, really in love with how this cleans up the imagery. So yeah, I think we're just going to call it there. I love the 32X, and I'm going to be talking a lot more about all of those different games. There's quite a few in my collection. And we'll also get to Street Fighter as well, but that's part of a special video series that I'm going to be doing later. Anyway, I'm going to cut the video there. So yeah, if you can get yourself a 32X, make sure you get all the cabling and stuff and try to find some solution for the power supply. I really, really recommend it. It looks fantastic, and it's a definite recommendation for any collection. Until next time, we'll see you down the rabbit hole.